Hunger. A natural response we have when our body is in need of nourishment. But what happens when that hunger cannot be satisfied? When the craving keeps coming back, begging you to continue your indulgence, the craving for human flesh. The Algonquin people refer to this type of abominable desire as being possessed by an evil spirit known as the Wendigo, a spirit susceptible to those who face extreme hunger, isolation, and cold. Many First Nation people believe in an entity that attacks lone group members facing those conditions in stranded woodlands, especially in the North American and Canadian regions. Enter the curious case of Swift Runner, a man who would be all too familiar with the need to indulge in the forbidden and horrific. Swift Runner, a Cree Indian from what is today central Alberta, Canada, was a husband and father of 6 children. He made a living as a trapper and also being a guide for the Northwest Mounted Police. Runner was a hulking man, standing well over 6 feet tall, and was well liked by the tribe and community. His kindness toward his children and family, as well as his soft demeanor, made him well liked and endeared by the Hudson Bay Company as well as the Mounted Police. His admiration, however, would later sour over time. Swift Runner developed a taste for alcohol, whiskey to be more specific, which was smuggled into the area under the guise of being medicine. Many believe his slowly increasing inability to hunt led him to drink, as he was having difficulties providing for his family. This moderate affinity for the amber-colored spirit would become an addiction, which would have him falling deeper into the throes of alcoholism, and what would later unfortunately take place. His drinking would cause him to be an angry drunk, creating problems for the locals and tribesmen. He was first fired from the Northwest Mounted Police as a guide, and later exiled from his tribe for his violent tendencies. So, during the harsh winter of 1878, Swift Runner had taken his wife, 6 children, his mother-in-law, and brother out into the forest to start a new life of promise and hope. Their venture out into the wilderness at first seemed to be very promising, as game was plenty. Moose and bear frequented the land. However, come February, all that promise, all that hope, was beginning to seem bleak. Swift Runner had fallen ill, and his family could barely find anything to hunt. They sadly had to resort to killing and eating the dogs they had brought with them. Better times seemed to be right over the horizon, as there was a post in the Hudson Bay Company not far from where they were camped, on the Athabasca River with emergency provisions and supplies. Sadly, these provisions would not last long. Deep hunger started to set in throughout the camp. His brother, with the help of Swift Runner's mother-in-law, decided to go out and hunt for food. They never returned. Days went by, and hunger became worse and worse. Swift Runner had told his wife to take 5 of the 6 children, and to follow the tracks his brother and mother-in-law had left, in hopes that they would find them with something to eat. While being subjected to the harsh elements and ever-growing void in his stomach, Swift Runner claimed to have been plagued by nightmares and an evil spirit known in Algonquin folklore as the Wendigo. Please be advised, this next part gets very graphic and is not for the faint of heart or stomach. Skip to this part of the video if you please. Swift Runner awoke one morning to see his son sleeping by the fire. Possessed by the Wendigo, he had taken his rifle and shot his son in the head. Still noticing that his son was breathing, Swift Runner grabbed a knife and sunk it into the side of his son twice. Still noticing him breathing, he then picked up a stick and killed him with it. He lived for a couple days, surviving off of the flesh of his son, breaking the bones of his boy to extract the marrow inside. After that, Swift Runner would later meet up with his wife and remaining children. He told them that the boy had died of starvation. Shortly after meeting up with his family, the oldest of his boys had also died. He was buried. Things continued to get worse, so much so that they were even reduced to boiling and eating some of the leather from their shoes and tents. Soon after that, suspicion had grown among the remaining family that Swift Runner may have murdered and cannibalized his son. He would soon discover that his family wanted to leave him Once again, in the early hours of the morning, by the guide of the Wendigo, Swift Runner grabbed his rifle and shot his wife. He then, without hesitation, grabbed his hatchet and butchered his 3 little girls. He would too break their bones and extract the marrow from them as well. All this while a provision post was 8 miles away. All that was left was his youngest son. He had awakened the child and sent him off to fetch some snow to melt and boil. So defeated and exhausted by starvation, the 7-year-old boy hadn't the slightest clue of what had just taken place. The 2 had survived off of the flesh of their family until the thaw of winter came. As spring arrived, bringing in flocks of fowl and fresh game to hunt, Swift Runner, reflecting on the horrors he had committed, knew that the people of the town and tribe would soon wonder what happened to the family. He intended to stay in the wilderness as long as possible. He eventually told his son that they would soon travel into town and that no harm would come to him, as the boy did nothing wrong. However, one night by a campfire, being consumed by the Wendigo spirit, Swift Runner would send his son to grab something for him. With his son's back turned to him, Swift Runner seized this opportunity and grabbed his rifle, mortally wounding the last remaining heir to his legacy. There was later speculation that he had also killed his mother-in-law and brother, as it is reported that there was a small moccasin that had been stuffed into the skull of Swift's mother-in-law, with a beading needle sticking out of the unfinished shoe. In order to prolong his stay in the forest, Swift Runner subsisted off of the flesh of his last remaining son. This, coupled with his rapid decline in mental health, would not prove to last long at all. He stumbled out of the woods soon after into a nearby Catholic mission. There he would tell the priest that his entire family had died of starvation, and that his wife had committed suicide as a result. However, weighing over 200 pounds himself, he didn't quite look like the type of individual who had just survived through starvation and the heartache at the loss of his entire family. Not to mention, the priest had also known of other Cree natives who had made it through the winter without having any issues hunting. They became very suspicious of Swift Runner and his stories, even more so by his constant nightmares. So severe that he would wake up screaming in the middle of the night. Their suspicions were realized when they caught Swift Runner trying to lead a group of children into the woods. With this, they went to the authorities. Many sources disagree on how the authorities were led to the campsites where the grisly murders had taken place, though there is recorded evidence that Swift Runner had led them in circles. Only once they got him drunk enough to cooperate did he lead them to the campsites. Nothing could prepare them for what they found next. They found the grave of his oldest son. His skeleton was still intact. This, however, did not explain all of the bones strewn about the campsite. Some broken in half and hollow, a sign that the marrow had been sucked out of them. As if the bones weren't enough to convict him, their suspicions were confirmed when discovering a pot of human fat. Swift Runner had told the authorities that the Wendigo spirit had come to him in the night, possessing him and controlling him to kill and cannibalize his family. The authorities believed this to be a fabrication and arrested him. In 1879, in court, the jury was told of Swift Runner's experience with the Wendigo and what the spirit caused him to do. The jury did not buy his story of the supernatural entity, and had only taken 20 minutes to convict the Cree native of the murder and cannibalization of his family, and when asked if he has anything to say regarding the charges against him, he responded with, "I did it." He was sentenced to death by hanging. Fort Saskatchewan, 7:30 a.m., December 20th, 1879. On a bitter cold day, Swift Runner would take his final steps to the gallows. A crowd of over 60 people had gathered near the foot of the scaffold. His hanging would be delayed, however, as the crowd had taken the trap from the gallows and burned it as kindling. The hangman had also forgotten to bring straps to bind the prisoner's arms together. It is said that as the executioner and sheriff were getting the scaffold ready, that Swift Runner had sat by one of the nearby fires that had been lit. joking and chatting while snacking on pemmican, a snack made from tallow, dried meat, and dried berries, popular amongst indigenous cuisine. All this while the thick noose was still hanging loose around his neck. It's said that Swiftrunner had offered to kill himself with a tomahawk in order to save the hangman any further trouble. It is speculated that Swiftrunner converted to Catholicism before being hanged. There is no evidence to support this. There is also an account that dictates that Swiftrunner had declined to spend the night with a priest to absolve him of his actions, with him even solidifying these claims by saying, "The white man has ruined me. I don't think their God could amount to much," before being led to the gallows 2 hours later. He stood atop the scaffold, a thick black hood placed over his head. The trapdoor opened, and Swiftrunner became the first ever legally hanged criminal in the Canadian Northwest Territories. Sheriff Edward Richard, who oversaw the execution, while giving an interview, was recorded as saying, "The trap fell, and Swiftrunner went down with a fearful force. There being a drop of 5 feet, he died without a struggle. The body was cut down in an hour and buried in the snow outside the fort." A spectator to the hanging, who was later interviewed, who had said to have seen 29 hangings in his lifetime, was recorded slapping his thigh and saying, "Boys, that was the prettiest hanging I have ever seen." The case of Swiftrunner has perplexed many over the course of a century, with many believing in his victimization by the evil entity. In 1920, an oblate missionary, J.E. Saindon, while working with the Cree community in the western James Bay area, spoke to a woman who had claimed that she saw strangers who wanted to kill and devour her. Saindon referred to this woman's mental condition as psychoneurosis, caused by depression and anxiety. Over time, however, this condition would become known as Wendigo psychosis. Whether you believe in the Wendigo spirit possessing him to do what he did, or think it's just the actions of a cold-blooded monster, one thing is for certain. A monster did take the lives of innocent women and children during that harsh winter of 1878, even if we disagree on which kind of monster it was. Hey guys, Extremo here. I hope you stuck with me to the end. This case has always interested me, and I've never seen anyone really talk about it. I've always seen them talk about the Wendigo and creepy stories surrounding them, but they never went into depth with Swiftrunner and what happened to his family. To be honest, I actually feel kind of bad for the guy. Being stranded in the middle of the woods with your family, not being able to provide for them, with the cold and the constant starvation, he probably just, snapped and lost his mind. There were earlier recorded mentions of Swiftrunner becoming a cannibal before that even happened. I guess there were certain Cree chiefs that said that when Swiftrunner was hunting in his earlier years, that he actually did eat someone in order to survive. But again, I can't find any evidence to support this, and I just feel worse for the family. But I hope you guys liked the video. This was definitely interesting, researching and doing the deep dive into this, which I actually really liked. I definitely might look into doing more true crime stuff and, posting it on the channel. So please, if you guys like it, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on those. If you have any thoughts or comments on the story, please feel free to put those below. Also, follow my socials down in the description. And if you guys have any stories or any topics you'd want me to look up or search, please email me or write them in the comments. But anyways, I've been rambling. I'll see you guys on the next one. I love you all, and thanks for watching.